Hello. So I'm Preet, and this podcast series is called Living for the Weeknight. And I wanted to make a introductory episode in order to kind of explain what the podcast is going to be about, as well as my thinking about why I'm doing this and kind of what I want from this. This is actually my first time recording a podcast series, and I'm hoping that everything goes relatively smoothly. The audio should be fine, but this is the fun part about this is that it's still like a learning process for me. And the nice thing is, there's going to be plenty to learn about in the process, which is, part of the creative process, like learning to use new software, realizing that software is shitty, and then changing it up. But, learning how the software works and how to make everything sound as good. It's all part of the process, which is something I'm actually looking forward to. So let's kind of step into this. Why am I doing this podcast? Well, I'm doing this podcast because I want to explore like creativity and passions outside of the world of work and kind of have like a deeper dive into what drives people to do this, as well as, how they can manage to achieve this and like any setbacks that occur in the process. Just kind of maybe that would delve deeper into then mental health as well as happiness and what this experience brings you. I feel like the scope of the podcast is going to be pretty different based on all the guests we talk to, because this isn't going to be a series I do by myself. Every episode, I'll have one guest or multiple guests, and we'll talk about like what their passions are outside of work and how they make it work outside the 9 to 5, which is, where the name of the podcast comes from, living for the weeknight, I guess. I don't need to explain how that's come, or maybe I do. Okay, for our listeners who maybe English isn't their first language, it's a saying in English to say living for the weekend, and this describes someone who their job maybe isn't everything for them, and they're doing their job because then their life occurs on the weekend. It's just a saying we have in English, and I'm not saying here that living for the weeknight is meaning that you don't like your job or whatever. You might like your job. Your job could also be part of your passion too. But I just wanted to use it as a name to kind of talk about the 5 to 9, I guess, as people say. So the outside the 9 to 5 of what else you do and how you make it work for you. But yeah, so I want the kind of structure of the podcast then to be pretty free flowing, and ideally like each episode won't follow a set formula, but I'll have just some questions I can keep to if I want to keep the podcast on track, or if it's going like a bit too much on a tangent. But normally I find these tangents when you're talking about your passions actually form kind of like the better form of conversation. So the idea is that I won't really need to cut too much out, or that I won't have to kind of follow a formula, because I just don't want it to be so set and rhythmatic. I'd rather it kind of be flowing. Also, I think I used the word rhythmatic there in the wrong way, but who cares? Also, when I'm looking at this software, every time I kind of laugh, I see these big spikes, and I play that back and it just sounds so loud. So I apologize for that. It's something I'm gonna get used to, and maybe in editing I can like make it so that I'm not damaging your ears, so that this is a pleasant experience for all of us. Now, I thought it would be good to kind of explain why personally I'm doing this. Like, why go make a podcast? What is it for me that I want out of this? So I'm doing this podcast because I thought it would just be a very good creative passion project I could have outside the world of work. I love talking to people. I'm very extroverted for people who know me, and I love finding out about people kind of what it is they like doing in life. And I really have deep admiration for people who do have passions that they pursue outside the world of work, which we all know it's not easy. It's not easy to do your job and to come home tired from work and then have the motivation to pursue other things, because things aren't always that easy. Like, there's a lot of things we need to balance in terms of our mental health, our well-being, getting a good night's sleep, exercising, all that life stuff. So like when I actually meet people who are able to do stuff outside of work, like, I've met plenty of people who do their 9 to 5, but then they're doing music production at the same time and DJing, like doing their 9 to 5 job, evenings is making music, Friday, Saturday is like DJing at gigs, and I'm like amazed about how you find the energy for that and how you manage yourself not to get burnt out. So that's kind of like what my aim is. But also just kind of seeing the happiness it brings people, like what it means to them. I feel like I said that's kind of what I want, but honestly, I think I'm gonna actually, well, part of the journey of this podcast is learning like what it is I want from this. It's part of like the process for a creative process. And I think that's a cool part about it. I think I'm going to discover so much from this podcast just in filming it itself. And I guess that's what I want out from it. But I thought at the same time, it would be like super useful for the audience to be able to just listen to people talk about their creative endeavors or their passion projects or whatever it is, whoever I'm talking to, just because you might be in a similar boat where you're trying to manage the 9 to 5 and pursue other things in life. And it just might form an interesting listen for you guys. Well, I hope so. And I hope it's not like a weekly one listener. But to be honest, even if it is, that doesn't matter too much to me. I'm doing this not to make money or to be like a big podcast host or whatever. I'm doing this because it's fun. That's like kind of what I do with all my creative processes. I like, for example, the other day I started writing a script for an animated web series, and I wrote kind of half of it. Haven't touched it since, but I had fun doing it in the moment. Like, I'm not sure if I'll get back to it or if I want to pursue it, but that was just fun. And not everything. I've told myself like you don't have to put pressure on yourself to make something out of everything and have the complete finished product and the most amazing thing in the world. Sometimes I feel like the creative process is easier for me if my aim is just to have fun and just to see where it goes. And that's what I'm doing here. And I know I'm already rambling in this intro, but I'm having fun doing it. So, yeah, that's what it is. For those listeners who don't know me, I thought it would be pretty cool if I explained kind of a little bit about myself because it might paint a better picture about who I am, which could kind of help understand my motivations in this podcast a little bit better. So I I am a creative person. I really enjoy creative endeavors, but I admit for a lot of my life I never really did anything creative at all. I spent a lot of my life in the education system, like school, university. Then I did go backpacking for a bit to Asia, and I then came to work in like a consulting job. And as part of my job, I had to do exams for like 4.5 years, I think, while working. So I never actually had the time to do these creative passions. It felt like my life was long hours working or studying for these exams. And I used to tell myself, like, every day, I was like, okay, the minute I finish these exams, I'm gonna like pursue so much things I've always wanted to do. I actually feel like having lived that life, it gave me a bit of a satisfaction. For some reason, I wanted to say gratisfaction, but that's not a word. But yeah, so I actually feel like it's given me a lot of satisfaction in terms of the time I can use to do other things. Like, I saw what it was like in life to have something you really want to try, but you just can't because you're burnt out or there's no time at all. So I thought, fuck it. Now, why don't I just go for it? Why don't I pursue creative things? Like, I've already ordered some DJ decks, and I'm pretty excited to start learning how to DJ because I love drum and bass. Also, have a bit of love for techno too, and I like dubstep too. But yeah, it's one of the things I always told myself the minute I qualify, I'm going to do. And now I'm going to do as well as this. So that's kind of like why I like creative stuff. And I feel like just being able to talk to people about how they are balancing their 9 to 5 with their creative endeavors may give me inspiration too in the moment, as well as the audience. Listening to that journey about how people explore their creativity sometimes, because sometimes it can be pretty daunting starting something. Like, you don't know how to start, you realize you have to learn new software, you have to do this, you have to do that, and it can feel quite exhausting before you even start. So it'd be nice to see how people do it differently because we all do it differently. Like, for example, my approach right now is don't be scared, just start doing and see where it goes. Like, get it wrong faster and then learn from it. because I used to be the type of person who would want to do everything pretty perfectly and like know like be able to master the software first and be able to edit and do this and that. And right now, this is my first run through of recording myself. I'm using Audacity, never used Audacity before, haven't even looked at a tutorial. I just hit the record button and that was it. I did a little bit of testing before because I wanted to see like how my microphone worked on my Bluetooth headset. Then I realized there was some horrible interference and input delay, and apparently the mic from my MacBook is actually better. But yeah, hopefully eventually, once I get paid from my new job, I'm going to start to buy stuff like microphones and other things to enhance the audio quality. And now, admit, I feel like I'm rambling, which is always how I feel when I'm kind of talking about something which makes me feel excited. But yeah, to cut it short, I'm doing this podcast because I think it's going to be fun. I think it's a useful thing to understand how people balance their passions outside of the 9 to 5. This isn't going to be a podcast about, oh, you can do a side hustle and how to make money outside of your job. Nah, I just want to learn how people balance stuff and mainly just the happiness it brings them, like what it means to them, what it does for their mental health. And it isn't going to be a podcast to tell you all how you can do stuff better or whatever. I don't want anyone to feel put down from this podcast about how they're living their life. We all have different lives. We all have different, financial needs, different constraints, just different things to make it work. And then we're all different people, and our mental health is all very different in terms of how we have to take care of ourselves. So this is more just an insight into other people. This isn't anything which is like a pressure of anyone needing to change, because you live our own lives and that's our own lives. But for those who are wanting to like start doing creative stuff outside the world of work, hopefully this can be useful for you. And thank you. I guess that's the end of the introduction, and I'll see you all next time when I do my first episode with a very special guest. The special guest being a friend of mine, not like a celebrity or anything. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, but we will do. But yeah, take care, guys, and bye.